Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is never lost on me the honour that it is to stand in this Assembly and really participate in any debate. But it's all the more poignant, I think, when we all, and in this case, obviously for myself, when I get to stand in my place as the MLA for Swift Current and participate in the debate, the throne speech debate. So I want to state that for the record again, how grateful I am to the electors of the constituency of Swift Current, those who voted for me and those who didn't. It is a great honour to serve them. It has ever been since 1999. It continues to be, and I'll work hard to earn the support that was given on the 4th of April in my constituency, and I'll work hard to also earn, I guess, the moral support for those in our constituency who voted in another way. I want to very quickly go through some thank yous. I note that members on both sides of the House have done that since the election, and I think it's meet and right that we would acknowledge those who helped get us here. And so for me, the list is long. I'm very grateful to the campaign committee and the volunteers in Swift Current. I wasn't really much of a candidate in Swift Current, I'm afraid to say. I didn't do a lot of door knocking there, which is to say I didn't do any door knocking in Swift Current. They did all of that hard work during and before the election. Trevor Moe was the campaign chair, and I'm not going to list a bunch, but I'll just through this place and on the record of Hansard thank him and all of those who participated. I also need to thank all of those who helped with the other campaign, the central campaign. As I said on election night, I think they're the best in the country, and I want to acknowledge them. Especially want to say thank you to someone I don't thank enough, and his name is Everett Hindley, and he's been with me since 1999. He's been a constituency assistant for me, and now he's stuck traveling the province with me, and he's just he's a great individual. He's become a good friend and a trusted source of counsel, and I want to get on the record my appreciation for Everett. I am blessed to be married to Tammy. She has been, since I began this political career or journey, she's been just an amazing partner and someone who's given much, both for her own career, but of her time. Over and above that, her support to me has always been unqualified, and I want to thank her. We have 3 great kids. Our oldest is Megan. She got married last year in the Cypress Hills, and her and our new son-in-law, Kyle Days, who's of the Great Days family from Hillmont, Saskatchewan, in the constituency of Lloydminster. I'm looking at, there's the MLA for Lloydminster. It's a large group, and you lose track of folks. And so they're doing well studying, and I'm happy to report to the House that they'll both be coming back to the province of Saskatchewan here in the fall, and can't wait for that to occur. Our middle child is Coulter, and very, very proud of what he's been doing lately in the career that he started. I'll just tell this quick story. Mr. Speaker, it was a great day just a few months ago when I checked into a hotel in Saskatoon, and the young woman that was the professional at the desk asked for my name, and I said it, and she said, "Are you?" And I thought she was going to say something about politics, and she said, "Are you Coulter Wall's dad?" And so that was one of the best days I've had on this job. I'm also known as the guy that sits beside the dad of Mark McMorris and Craig McMorris. So now we have there's another descriptor there, and I want to acknowledge Coulter, and then our youngest is Faith, and she's in grade 12, graduating this year, heading off to the University of Saskatchewan, and she has just grown into this beautiful and funny and witty, intelligent young woman, and we're proud of what Faith's doing. Mr. Speaker, I think it was interesting how the week began. The week of the throne speech, of course, began outside the sessional activities of this place when there was the swearing in of members of the Legislative Assembly on both sides of the House, and when there was also later that evening the unveiling of the dome. And I know some people were hoping that the unveiling would show a little more, as it were, but we knew that this is going to be a long process where the scaffolding is going to come down up until about, it's going to take till about July, but the ceremony itself was, I think, provided some historical symmetry, both for this session, but I hope it had all of us remembering the importance of the tradition of this place and the history of this place, and more to the point, I hope that it had us thinking about those who went before us, whose vision was great and worthy of this province, but who are also worried about the day-to-day things, like getting this building opening and getting the school system, the education system implemented across the province, and getting a university built, and just delivering on the day-to-day affairs of government, and more on that in a moment. Shortly after that October day when the building was first opened, in fact it was the 14th of November 1912, there was from your throne, Mr. Speaker, the very first speech from the throne, at least in this chamber, because obviously they had been presented to the Assembly before they moved into the new digs, as it were. And on that particular day, the Lieutenant Governor was the Honourable George W. Brown. He was the Lieutenant Governor when the building opened, and obviously then he delivered the very first speech from the throne. There have been 20 other Lieutenant Governors who've taken that seat where you sit today, Mr. Speaker, and delivered, well, approximating 100 speeches from the throne to the people of this Assembly, to the members, and through them to the people they represent across the province. And if you think about that span of history, consider that there have been 6 monarchs in terms of the Commonwealth since the province really began. Edward VII, George V, Edward VIII, for a very brief time, as we all know, and then the Queen's father, George VI, and then for the last 6 decades now, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. That's quite a span of history. I would expect, and consider what this room would have been like. Frankly, it would have looked a lot like it does today, with just a few changes. In fact, the dais where you preside, Mr. Speaker, and from which this speech is read, is basically as it was the day it opened. Members will know that for a time, they took down this centerpiece and it was just a throne. And it wasn't until 1978 when they found that centerpiece up in the dome, ironically enough. There's nothing like that up there now, I don't think. We've all had a look, but that's where it was stored. And in '78, they basically wanted to restore this chamber to the way it was when this place first opened for business, with that first speech from the throne, middle of November 1912. Many of these desks are original. Most of the chairs, I think all of the chairs along the back, are original. And so when that first speech was read, there would have been a lot of things similar. If we could travel back in time, this place would not be that strange to us at all. Obviously, a number of changes have occurred since then, and I think that's probably a bit of a metaphor for where I would like to go in some brief remarks I have today. It strikes me, Mr. Speaker, that what the Lieutenant Governor surveys when he or she delivers the speech from the throne from your seat there, from the throne or the Speaker's chair, they're looking at really 2 things, whether they're thinking about it or not. They're looking at the very temporal nature of the legislature in the faces of the members that are here. As we're just passing through, some of us will be here for a little bit longer than others, I say to the member for Cannington, and some have just got here and have only been here a short time. But here's the inimitable truth of it all, that the faces are all going to change. That's the temporal perspective from that place. But as you look around this chamber, there is much that commends it to endurance. This place is going to be around long after we're gone, and it was here obviously for 100+ years before this day, before we had this particular debate and this particular speech from the throne. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I think a good speech from the throne would also reflect that. A speech from the throne should deal with the more temporal issues and challenges that face a government, that face our jurisdiction, that face the people of the province. But that speech should also glance above the horizon and take a longer view on behalf of the people, have a bit of vision about what we expect for this province and its people for generations to come. And I'm not claiming perfection for this speech from the throne or any other that we've had anything to do with. But I think that basic test was met in the speech from the throne that was delivered just last week from where you're sitting now. I think that particular speech from the throne dealt with a number of short-term issues that are important to the people of the province and that were campaigned on by the Saskatchewan party, by our party culminating in that election on the 4th of April. We did commit, and the Leader of the Opposition just mocked this, but we did commit to adding to historic highways investment in the province of Saskatchewan. He didn't reference that, by the way, when he was mocking the $70 million surge, these extra additional dollars for particularly problematic roads. And by the way, if I could offer some counsel to my friend, and I congratulate him on his job, I think some circumspection and description of some of these things is probably advisable, because he would know that the $70 million over a number of years is on top of about $2.7 billion plus, actually. the record investments that are being made in highways by this government that have been made, we broke our own record in every successive budget, those will continue. This is in addition to that. And we would rather it be more, but we also would rather to balance the budget by 17-18 and make sure that we are paying the bills as we go. And so, Mr. Speaker, there's a good example in the throne speech of maybe a shorter term but important issue that we should be addressing, and the speech from the throne should lay out the government's plan to do it. Another, perhaps shorter term item in the speech from the throne that I think is certainly worthy of its presence there and commends itself to this particular debate is the commitment on the part of the government in the speech from the throne to keep another campaign promise to extend the 2-for-1 MRI practice to CT scans in Saskatchewan. And I also heard the Leader of the Opposition sort of return in his speech to the tired old ideology of the 40s and 50s and 60s. He stood in this place and ruled out supporting the common sense of this 2-for-1 model. And do you know what's ironic about that, Mr. Speaker? When they sat in government, they implemented this very policy. And again, sometimes I wonder if there's the self-awareness over on the other side, or maybe they're not familiar with their own history, or they don't read their own reports, like, say, the Fight Commission, before they ask questions, as the Leader of the Opposition did yesterday, fighting for a hospital that would have been closed by the very report that he was recommending the government follow. It was a bit bizarre. But with respect to MRIs, let's remember the genesis of the model that the Minister of Health has brought to diagnostics. The NDP government wanted to provide the chance for Rough Riders to jump the queue. I think that's the word he just used in his debate. How could they get ahead of the line and get their MRIs so they could hopefully return to action on the field? Well, they came up with a pretty innovative way to do it. The NDP did, which they now deny.
It's hard to believe.
What they said was, well, the riders can do this, and workers' compensation clients can also do this, but workers' comp and the riders will have to actually buy a scan on the public system too. So you can have yours, you can pay for yours, your MRI, but you have to provide one to the public system to shorten that list. And so the Minister of Health presented to the people of this province, and supported by members, and we ran on expanding that to CTs, expanding that good common sense to Saskatchewan people. And why in the world would the Leader of the Opposition want to allow workers' compensation clients that opportunity, or Rough Riders that opportunity, yet deny it to Saskatchewan people who would like timely diagnostics? And again, may I just say, hopefully in a helpful way to my friend, the Leader of the Opposition, this is kind of some of the thinking that I think needs to change if they're to reconnect with Saskatchewan people. Saskatchewan people, they're informed by common sense. They're a veritable well of common sense if all of us would just listen to them a bit more, and I know all of us could do that, including members on this side of the House. And they would say it does make a lot of common sense for the government to say you can have your private MRI and now your private CT scan, but provide one on the public system and reduce that list. And I can inform the members of the House, I don't have a specific number, that only in the matter of weeks since we've implemented this measure for the MRIs, there have been people that have taken advantage of it. And so we know there are scans that have been provided on the public system, and we will expand it to CTs. And it's a good example of improved diagnostic wait times, or shorter wait times, a short-term measure that's referenced in the speech from the throne as well. There was a commitment as well that we would reduce the amount of administration in health care and redirect it to the front lines, specifically in long-term care, another good short-term measure in the throne speech. And then there were a number of specific items that were, well, the Deputy Premier is absolutely right. He just said that reminded me that the NDP called for this, and I remember in the debate, in the televised debate during the election campaign, we talked about this for a moment, and the then Leader of the Opposition, the then Leader of the NDP, Mr. Broughton, said, well, yours isn't enough. You're only going to save $7.5 million, and we would save $20 million. So I hope that members opposite will remember that they campaigned on that, because we think there is merit in exploring an increase to that number, and that's not the only reason that we're looking at transformational change, also referenced in the speech from the throne, but that may well be one manifestation, that balance between admin or board governance and frontline care, that we'll want to have a look at and engage with stakeholders on that particular subject as well. There are a number of long-term aspirational, well, more than aspirational, long-term, fairly definitive plans for the government that were outlined in the speech from the throne as well, and that included a reference to Sask Power's extension of the net metering program for solar power and our commitment to hit 50% renewables by 2030. That speaks very much to a long-term vision for this province. being very engaged on the climate change file and providing sustainable, low-cost electricity for the future growth of the province of Saskatchewan. You know, the member for Moosomin dealt with this in his maiden speech. The campaign promise for a new patent box in Saskatchewan is also referenced in the speech from the throne, and that's another great example of taking the long view, of having a vision for a continuing diversification in the economy, especially as it relates to creating a broader innovation sector and a more robust IT sector, perhaps even apps that deal with food could qualify perhaps as that.
Wow.
But Mr. Speaker, the patent box itself was something that we announced during the campaign and we're moving to implement now. It's referenced in the speech from the throne, and I'm excited about it. We're going to be the only jurisdiction in North America to offer this. What it is some tax protection while inventors and creators take the time to commercialize their idea, creating jobs as they do it, and get a bit of a break from the tax man, as it were, but only if they'll come to Saskatchewan. And this will be for homegrown inventors and creators. It'll also be for those who might want to come from outside the province and try their hand at business here and innovate here in Saskatchewan. It's called a patent box, but I want members of the House to remember that we're going to expand it beyond what patent generally connotes as manufacturing, and we want to make sure that that trade secrets, and that's a term that's readily used in that sector, and recipes are part of that protection. Because what's happening in this province in the food industry is remarkable. Mr. Speaker, in terms of food exports, we've seen huge progress. For many, many years in this country, it was taken as given that the province of Ontario would be the #1 food exporter of all the provinces. That was taken as given. That was taken as an undeniable fact that was not likely ever to change. Well, until Saskatchewan people decided to change that fact. And in the last number of years, I think now 3 in a row, the #1 food exporter in the Dominion of Canada is no longer our friends in Ontario, but it is this province. And it's not just the crops that we're producing. Increasingly, it's the diversified sort of value-added, up the value stream innovation around food development. And I'm looking forward to what the patent box idea will bring to that. Mr. Speaker, I can share the anecdote I did during the campaign very quickly with respect to one particular innovation at the Food Centre at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. There's a very well-known international, Canadian, but international presence that's looking at a brand new investment in the province, and came here to meet with the Food Development Centre in part, certainly, and he himself is a vegan. And so the food development, as is our oldest daughter, Megan. And so the Food Development Centre, knowing he was visiting, said, when you come here, is there any kind of food that you missed when you weren't a vegan? And he said, yeah. He said, I miss pulled pork. I'd really like, I wish I could still eat pulled pork. Some would say maybe Kentucky Fried Chicken, but for him, it was pulled pork.
Take me right now.
The Minister of Health is thinking of leaving the speech right now to go enjoy some of it. So they used the extruder at the Food Development Centre and a pea protein replacement, and made pulled pork. And then I met with the individual afterwards, and he said it tasted like pulled pork. He would order it in a restaurant. It's an anecdote, it's one little story, but it's the kind of innovation that's being done here in Saskatchewan, and we want to promote it. Because this side of the House has a vision for this province continuing as an answer to the world's food security concerns. This side of the House has a vision for this province continuing to build on its amazing export records over the last number of years, and we think at the core of that plan is the support for agriculture from the government. That doesn't mean sort of cash support, but that means fighting for better access to transportation. It means fighting for trade access as well, supporting things like TPP. That's what that means. Mr. Speaker, I would point out again for members of the House that the new Leader of the Opposition has hired a Chief of Staff who used to work for Tom Mulcair in Ottawa, who's on the record as opposing TPP. Really? We need to not send mixed signals from this place, not by whom we hire or the things that we say. TPP holds singular opportunities for us to reduce agriculture-related trade barriers around the world, especially in Asia where they exist. And so we ought not to send mixed signals from this place, wherever we sit, on something so fundamental to the province's future as trade opportunities in agriculture. We also want to continue to support agriculture's diversification through things like the patent box and investment in research. The bypass, that's a long-term investment that we're making for the province, and an important one. The largest infrastructure project in the history of the province. The project as it's constituted now was never $400 million. The project has grown, and you know, it's interesting because what we heard to some extent and what the Leader of the Opposition has just said was a bit of a rehash, a relitigation of their campaign platform.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, people weighed in on that campaign platform. People made some decisions about which aspects of the platform, and there were good ideas in their platform, certainly, but people weighed in on their platform and on their rhetoric and made a decision as to what didn't seem quite right. And some of the rhetoric and some of the hyperbole didn't sit well with Saskatchewan people who knew that the original price of $400 million didn't have the interchanges, wasn't anywhere near the scale and scope of the current bypass project, because this project needs to be for the long term, and it needs to be generational. And yes, we're using a P3 model, and the P3 model will save money over the conventional model, as it has with the long-term care facility in Swift Current, as it's doing for the school constructions, the new schools that are being built across the province. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, I think what you'll find, and I hope what people supported on April the 4th, is a pragmatic approach to these things. There will still be conventional infrastructure builds as long as we have the honour to serve in government, whether it's highways or schools. But we'll also look at innovation like P3s, and we're going to pick the best one. Best value for taxpayers, what gets the job done as quickly as it's needed. And in the case of schools, we've needed those quickly because of the rapid growth, the welcomed growth that we've seen in the province of Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, if I may, I think the throne speech does one other thing. It should speak to some short-term immediate needs of the province and how the government plans to address them, and it should also offer, again, that glimpse above the horizon to the excellence that we want for Saskatchewan, the plan for growth that we have, the vision of this place for decades to come. It also does a third thing, I think. It sets up the debate that we're going to have. And each speech from the throne would do that, I think, in any particular session. This is the 28th session, and it's already been marked by debate back and forth, whether it's question period or this throne speech debate. But I do think that the speech from the throne initiates a contest of ideas, or at least it should. At least at its best, this place should kind of defer to being that contest of ideas, knowing that we're also going to have some raucous debates and we'll have some rhetoric back and forth. But I think the speech from the throne should initiate a contest of ideas. And I want to say early on that I'm concerned about whether or not the speech from the throne is has been responded to in that way by everybody in the Assembly. It's early days, and so I'm still hopeful. And what I mean by that is I'm hopeful to see from our friends across the way something more than what they have been talking about for the 4 years prior to the election. Because I do think the election changes something. I think the election on April 4th is a bit of a reset, much as the speech from the throne is.
I think, David.
And so it gives us a chance to learn lessons from the campaign that we heard. And I know as we were door knocking, we heard very specific concerns from Saskatchewan people that maybe weren't represented in our platform, and we know we've got to work on those. We know we have to do better. But I am betting, I think, that the members across the way who are elected here and those that were not elected for them also heard a little bit from Saskatchewan people about what they expect from them. And I do think we've heard the Leader of the Opposition say they're going to do more than oppose, they're going to propose. Haven't seen that just yet, but I'm hoping that's the case, because I believe that's a mistake that's been made by the opposition in the last 2 terms. I don't think they presented early enough or often enough something more than criticism. And in opposition, we were imperfect at this as well, but we genuinely tried. We released an economic paper that highlighted what we believed in for our growth plan. By the way, the elements of that are included in the growth plan for the province of Saskatchewan even to this day. And those elements are competitive taxes and competitive regulations, changes to the labour laws of the province, so they'd be fair, but they would be competitive. Infrastructure investment, export engagement, innovation, diversification. That's that's the name of the document, and those principles have found their way into the growth plan. Does anybody know what the NDP believes on any of those?
No idea.
And yet there's been 2 now campaigns since 2007. I don't know if they would increase taxes or not. They kind of ran on on, it sounded like, increasing taxes in the last election, whether it's a carbon levy or changes to income tax. I don't know what they believe about labour legislation, labour legislative balance in the province. I don't know if they would undo all the changes that we've made, remove essential services legislation, go back to the day when we didn't have a secret ballot for certification votes. They would. Because they're silent on it. And you can't have a contest of ideas in a debate if only one side is saying, here's our program, here's our plan. And I would argue that political parties won't find success if all they do is criticize, and they're silent on these major issues. People deserve and demand more. They demand to know what you'll do in the short term, and they should demand to know what is your vision for the province of Saskatchewan. Do you really subscribe to growth? I don't really know if members opposite honestly believe that growth is fundamentally a good thing. On this side of the House, we know that growth comes with challenges. You have more people, you need to build schools, you have more people, there's greater demand for health care. Growth brings its challenges, but on this side of the House, without doubt and unequivocally, we welcome the challenges of growth versus the challenges of waving goodbye to a generation of young people like we used to. I happen to believe that the Leader of the Opposition personally supports growth, acknowledging the challenges. I don't know about some of the other ones. I don't know how you would go to a political convention and sign on in principle for the further discussion of the LEAP manifesto that quite literally would destroy our economy, that would shut down oil, that would shut down pipelines, that would shut down coal, that would end modern agriculture. And our answer is, well, I just wanted there to be a discussion. Well, do you know what we say on this side of the House? Some things are not worth discussing, including the devastation of the Saskatchewan economy. Not worth talking about. On occasions like that, we need NDP MLAs or any MLA, if there's a convention talking about it, to line up at the microphone and say the LEAP manifesto has no business being talked about, especially in Edmonton, and so close to the oil sands, but really anywhere in the country, because it would devastate the nation's economy. And then, Mr. Speaker, someone who would sign the LEAP manifesto, I don't think has any business doing renewal for any political party in the province of Saskatchewan. And yet, the Leader of the Opposition has handpicked someone, Nicole White, who ran for him and for his party and signed the LEAP manifesto. Signing it is an endorsement. So a good start would be for the NDP to come up and say unequivocally they're cutting ties with people that are opposed to the things that we do best in the province. The speech from the throne said, it's as though some people in this country are uncomfortable with what we do here. They're uncomfortable with modern agriculture. They're uncomfortable with GMOs. They don't really like oil. They don't really like coal. They don't really like mining. They don't really like uranium. This is what we do. This is how we've been able to contribute to the Canadian economy over the last number of years in ways that we've never been able to in the decades previous to that. It's how we've been able to build more roads and hospitals and schools and provide operating grant increases to universities and to those schools. We've done it on the strength of those very sectors. And there are people who are uncomfortable with it, Mr. Speaker, and some of them oppose it. And they just, I don't think that argument should be countenanced at all in this place. And there shouldn't be even tacit support for a discussion of that in this place. And there shouldn't be someone appointed to do renewal of a political party in this province in this place. Hear, 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 hear. And so I'm looking forward to the contest of ideas that should be enabled, and the throne speech should be the conveyance for that contest. I will just say this. There were three, in closing, there were three themes to the speech from the throne. People would say, well, they're pretty general themes, but I think they say a lot. They were the themes of our campaign. That we would keep Saskatchewan strong by keeping our economy strong. And for us, that means keeping taxes low and not hitting the economy now with any kind of a tax hike. It means keeping our finances strong in the province of Saskatchewan, and that means dealing with the challenges of this fiscal year and then moving towards a balanced budget, getting to a balanced budget by 17-18. Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the Opposition says that would be novel, since we were elected in 2007, this government has earned 2 AAA credit ratings. This government has retired just below 40% of the operating debt of the province of Saskatchewan. His counterparts in Alberta have been downgraded, I don't know, twice in the last couple of weeks. And so, Mr. Speaker, we will stand on our fiscal record. We will stand on our fiscal record as the credit rating agencies are in terms of how they've weighed in, and we'll move to strengthen even further in the months ahead. And then finally, the other theme, the third theme of how you keep Saskatchewan strong is that we would continue to stand up for Saskatchewan's interests. Mr. Speaker, this isn't just our duty, it is an honor. It is an honor for each of us to be able to stand up for the interests of our constituents. Their jobs, whether they're in the cities or in the country, whether they're in agriculture or oil or mining, or whether they're on Broadway or the cathedral area, whatever those jobs are, it is our unqualified honor to be able to stand up for their interests. What does that mean exactly? Well, it means when our economic interests are threatened externally, perhaps by policies from the federal government or trade actions of another country, like country of origin labeling. Our resolve is that we are going to stand up and speak in a clarion way on behalf of the people of this province, on behalf of their economic interests. We're not going to worry too much, perhaps, about being too polite sometimes, because we need to be able to make the case for Saskatchewan people. I noted again in the member for Moosomin's maiden speech, he told a great story actually about I think a 15-year-old girl in his constituency whose dad was a financial planner and I think a supporter, or maybe there's a pretty good chance if you're in the Moosomin constituency, he's probably supported the member. But she was uninterested in politics, I think is how it went. Didn't see how it really would impact her life. And so the member quite, I think, in an elegant way, connected some of the dots as to why politics might be important for that young person. He pointed out that there was a manufacturer down the road, and if that manufacturer was doing well because there weren't international duties holding them back, and because the government was not taking more than its share of taxes, and that it was ensuring there was a competitive environment, if that was happening, the people would be working at that plant, and there would be a greater customer base for the father who was a financial planner, and that father who was a financial planner wouldn't have to make some drastic household budget decisions up to and including possibly getting rid of her horse, which I thought was a pretty graphic. I'm glad to hear they're still supporting you. That's a pretty graphic description of, but a connection between why politics is important, why things like the speech from the throne and its contents are important, how it can impact the daily lives of Saskatchewan people, but more importantly, how it can set the right environment, how it can set the right tone for an entire province, so that manufacturer in that constituency and entrepreneurs across this province can grow and thrive and create jobs that are the basis for every quality of life that we want for our electors, regardless of where we sit in the House. And the speech from the throne is an adjunct to the growth plan of this province that we have implemented since 2007, that we've updated in 2011, that is precisely all about that. And more important than just the daily enjoyment of that horse by that young woman, our vision is that she will be able to go to school, perhaps, in this province, post-secondary education. She'll be able to graduate, or maybe she wants to start her own business. She'll be able to do that. If it is post-secondary school, that she could use the graduate retention plan to stay, and maybe use the graduate retention plan to buy her first home. But it's our vision that beyond the temporal, that she would be able to stay in this province, create a life in this province, have the choice to stay, to build her future here so that she could raise her own horses for her own kids and not have to worry about her dad's household finances. Mr. Speaker, that's what a throne speech should be about, the short term, but also the long term. A vision that's worthy of the people that sent us here, worthy of a province as blessed as this one with all of the resources that we have. We're going through a time of economic challenge today, but make no mistake, we're coming out stronger on the other side, and we will be stronger for the contents of the speech from the throne, stronger for the growth plan that this party has implemented and will stand with and stick to for as long as we have the humbling opportunity to serve on this side of the House. And I am honored to vote for a speech from the throne that was moved by the member for Saskatoon Westview. If our government works as hard as he did, we'll be okay. And the same is true for the seconder, the MLA from Estevan. I will be supporting the speech from the throne.